everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk MLOps. My name is Becky, and I'm on a mission to find out the latest trends, challenges, and prospects within machine learning, and with a particular focus on machine learning operations, or MLOps. Throughout this series, I'll be talking to experts within the field who will share their knowledge as well as advice for implementing, monitoring, and scaling successful machine learning practices. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk MLOps. I am super excited to be joined today by Gema Parreño, who is a developer advocate and data scientist at Iterative, the company behind DVC. Now, Gema has also designed Deep Asteroid, a network to detect the impact of asteroids on Earth. She's also made some developments and is a contributor to DeepMind's Psych2 project. Gema is also the founder of Mempathy, a video game experience which focuses on helping humans to change their relationship with anxiety and perfectionism. So many exciting projects, Gema. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. And yeah, basically it sounds like a lot of things, but
Yeah.
then at the end of the day, I like creating for solving problems. And I've been kind of like the machine learning space for a while. And yeah, if there's kind of like a common mental model, might be kind of like the open source mentality, as I share and have been a contributor for some projects. So yeah, thanks for having me today.
You're super welcome. Thank you so much for joining. So many questions I want to ask you and want to hear about. But I think a really nice place to start might be with your journey, right? I think from what from what I can see in the discussions we've had before, it's quite an interesting, perspective about MLOps. And actually, I'll just mention to everyone, I met Gema back in November, wasn't it, at the Rework MLOps Summit, and we hit it off straight away. That was lovely. And I don't know how I managed it. I don't know if you fixed the competition, but I managed to come second somehow. So my skills aren't too bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, very nice contestant. We must say, it was absolutely fair play. So
Okay.
yeah, we did like a. I think you got a DB. Did you go a DB from like the DB puppet from like the contest?
Oh, the owl.
Yes.
No, I didn't. I think the owl was the first prize. I
Oh
think I
wow.
remember the owl was the first prize. The second prize was still great. It was an Amazon voucher, so I'm not going against that. But I
Great.
remember I had my eye on the DVC owl, which is lovely.
Yeah.
It's like a multicolor, right?
Multicolor all, which kind of like aligns with our mentality as well. But yeah,
It's
to going
lovely.
back to your kind of like question,
Yeah.
this is very, very interesting. And I have been following kind of like this MLOps coin term for a while. So for me, it came on naturally when starting this journey of like putting models into production about like 1 year and a half ago as a data scientist consultant for a big online retailer. So we had like the challenge based on a 2 million online user database to predict online purchases within a course of like a week. So yeah, it was kind of like a challenge of like scaling a prediction with a modeling production. And I got familiar with the term for the first time with this kind of like MLOps.org website, which was kind of like defining like a set of like principles for that. Uh, but yeah, I mean, in to be honest, I want to bring kind of like this data science perspective, which I think that this term MLOps has changed a lot, like the data scientist perspective, from being like kind of like more analytical to maybe like more a little bit more software oriented with software in mind. So my journey started there, right? I mean, it's like we need to put a model into production. As a data scientist, how do we scale kind of like this model prediction mentality?
Awesome. And then I suppose you've already kind of touched upon it, but in terms of a general definition For those who may not be familiar yet with MLOps, how would you define MLOps? And also, is it different defining MLOps and MLOps practices from a data science perspective, would you say?
That's a very good question. So if we have to define it in one sentence, I would say that it's kind of like ML based software, and it's kind of like bringing this DevOps philosophy and kind of like this software best practices into machine learning, which are kind of like specific creatures, right? It's not just like a canonical piece of software. It has like many things, has like a data, parameters, code. So there are like many kind of like variables to take into account. And yeah, I mean, I think that it could be a common definition for both the stakeholders and the technical kind of like folks involved in this. From a data scientist perspective, yeah, I mean, introducing the word software into account takes not only this analytical mental model of I have to do like feature engineering, I have to load the data, but like I have to prepare or at least be aware that like a piece of software will be prepared for this. So yeah, making like a software into the equation kind of like change a little bit the level of abstraction.
Yeah.
When you think about that, at least code wise. But yeah, it's exciting, right? And like
Yeah.
I love that like many other roles have come into the equation, such as like the ML engineer. It's very cool to see how it's very interesting to see how the field has been evolving, and yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Oh yeah, for sure. And are there any other sort of evolutions that you've seen since you became familiar with the practices and the term? Would you say, does it feel like it's constantly evolving, would you say?
That's a very good question. So the thing is that for me, for example, like the first software touch point from a data scientist perspective was the cookie cutter, which is like a template actually
Okay.
that is like how to prepare kind of like a more software based for data science. So it has kind of like a repository structure in which like you can make some processes like more automatic. So yeah, I mean that's for sure was like my first the questions you make. It's like, yes, I see that like many tools are born, many platforms are born, and like for me this kind of like exploration, that's how I actually knew DVC, which is kind of like the data versioning tool. In a sense it's like the Git for data scientists. So yeah, I think it's fascinating the huge amount of tools that are coming, and like to specifically to see the pain points, right? That like
Yeah.
it's tool it's solving, like from my perspective and the data science perspective. So there's like this kind of like how to build a model like in a scalable abstract manner to be kind of like you can reproduce it easily, you can version the data, and also like kind of like these experiments, right? So when we think about like data science experiments, like previously it has like this notebook kind of like structure, but with the maturity of the field is changing, and kind of like new ways to approach this are emerging. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And going back to, you briefly mentioned some of the tools or just the concept of the different tools.
Mhm.
Are there key tools that you recommend and that you always use for your own projects? What tools would you recommend as a base, for MLOps practices and pipelines?
Yeah. So that is great. So as a data scientist, one of the things that like has changed my mindset is kind of like the data version moment, in which like you are working with multiple data sets, you are changing the data, you have to have them, and like you are renaming them and kind of like losing later, kind of like losing that context. So yeah, I mean kind of like using like a data version control tool uh it's great because like it allows like better collaboration, more control, avoiding duplicates. That's amazing. And I'm also like super interested in like experimentation platforms. So how can I take my code and how can I easily scale my analytical mental model, as in changing like the dimensionality of a tree, or changing like how are the dimensions of a neural network, and see the results and see them faster. And yeah, I'm super interested in that. I have like been exploring like a few tools. And yeah, now I'm working with like the extension, the VS Code, DVC VS Code extension, which is open source, and I'm heavily, of course, like giving it a use. And yeah, it has changed for the best my way to think about experiments.
Yeah.
As in before, I was like doing notebooks and then copying the notebook and then like doing another thing. And now I think in YAML files, I think like in a file that like it's an abstraction of like a lot of code of my code, and I changed some stuff. So my mental model goes like I'm making like some YAML files that represent different experiments, and I want just like let them like run. So yeah, that changes a lot the perspective.
What you mentioned specifically experimentation platforms, is that right?
Mhm.
What are experimentation platforms?
So I see when you say like a machine learning experimentation platform, I understand this like as a system that like can be a website, can be a system that can be like a website or command line interface scenario that aims to solve the machine learning experiment problems that you have. So you can have like you can version many models that come from different hyperparameters. You can version the data that is going to enter, and you can analyze and persist. So for me, like the platform is kind of like this centralized place that solves all these problems.
Okay, nice. And sort of going back to what you've said about that collaboration point
Mhm.
with data scientists, in your and the angle and the perspective of the data science within MLOps, in your opinion, where should a data scientist get involved? And where in the, you know what I mean? It's always a hard, I know that that always comes back into play, that collaboration between the
Mhm.
engineers and the data scientists. And yeah, where, in your opinion, within MLOps, where should a data science get involved, and where does that involvement end? Or, when are they being asked to do too much, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm maybe calling more like a human perspective here. So I'm calling first kind of like an empathy, a movement, and be able to see the skill set of like the data scientists. Data scientists can be like super multidimensional. So there's like kind of like the super statistical profile, right? That it's like able to get insights and is like super keen on like some set of metrics. And like there are like other data scientists that are kind of like more into the model, and another data scientists that are kind of like the model but with software, right? I mean, they care about the code, they care about like Python best practices, they care about like separating like definition for instantiation, and yeah, I to be honest, like with empathy, I think all can coexist,
Mhm.
but in like in a production scenario, ready scenario, um, I have been like taking that extra effort, right, to kind of like trying to make like the code like kind of like more software based, even though I'm doing data science. So it depends a lot, but yeah, having like someone that can add that like software value can be nice, because like in the end you have to touch with the ML engineer. Um, and yeah, but also I don't want to dismiss the more analytical profile, which I think that they add like tons of value. I know that this kind of like question answer maybe is not it's a little bit vague, but yeah, I think with empathy and having like I know that this answer can sound very vague, but at the end of the
No,
day, I
because you
think
have it depends, right? There's such a variation of profiles from what you're saying, that
Mhm.
maybe it's not a case of one size fits all, right? Maybe there's variation.
Yeah, of course, if you are kind of like in the smaller companies, in the startups. So yeah, maybe like a profile for data scientists that like can actually get to the code ready scenario in which like can build a pipeline in a kind of like ML engineer setup makes sense. But like also the analytical, we cannot dismiss the analytical mindset of like a data scientist must bring in the end, right? So yeah, it depends. But yeah, if you want to go into production, kind of like learning that can, let's say that it can take you a long way. Yeah, a long way.
Yeah. I love the fact that you keep coming back to empathy. That's something very close to my heart as well, and I think essential in all, in all teams. But specifically, would you say then within MLOps processes, empathy has got to be one of the core factors?
That's, I mean, wow, that's a good question. So well, empathy, in my perspective, should be part of like every team. But yeah, I mean, if there are like different roles and they have like touch points in which like each one has to understand kind of like each one's where like the skill set of like each one, it's always good to bring it. I'm looking forward to also kind of like this ML ops. It's been here for a few years, right? Like since 2019 ish. And yeah, I mean, these new roles like the data scientists, the ML engineers are coming, have come. And yeah, I believe that in the end of the day, software best practices also can have human best practices.
Yeah,
So
yeah, awesome. What do you think on the flip side? What do you think are some of the mistakes that people make or that teams make when they are looking to implement, MLOps practices into their business?
hmm, hmm. Uh, that's a good one. So I like from that I'm bringing kind of like this thought that Andy brought in the last podcast, right? I mean, he says like in the beginning we were like putting in a room a lot of data scientists
Yeah,
together
yeah, 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 yeah.
and kind of like solve this problem and put it into production. So yeah, I mean, I agree with him in that kind of like in this kind of like having multiple set of profiles can be super useful. It's mandatory. So I agree with that. I think there are kind of like inflection points. So for example, like one, your stakeholder is understanding like the problem that you are having. Your data is consistent, and you have like the data ready for of that you need. And then the model is performing well, right? Because like we are talking about deployment, but like we also have to monitor the model. We have to see that the model is working and is performing well over time. So yeah, that's for me that it's more than a mistake. That which mistakes I would like to bring, maybe like where can you be kind of like more aligned. So yeah, with stakeholders, maybe in that deployment, data versioning and deployment scenario, in that continuous integration, and then monitoring. So
Okay, awesome. And looking into, we're just starting out 2023 now, looking forwards into the coming months, what would you say? Are there any particular trends that you can see coming, or other challenges that haven't arrived yet that will be coming? Is there anything specific, within your team or related to MLOps that you've seen coming over the next months?
That's a really interesting question. So yeah, we're seeing like this continuing trend in importance of the kind of like data centric approach to AI. So yeah, I mean, deployment and making like best models, right? We're now thinking about like a version control work to create a query language specific of the types of data used for computer vision and NLP across clouds. So yeah, I mean, kind of like this data-centric approach. How does it evolve? How is like the how this goes? That's very exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I hadn't heard so much about the data-centric approach. Personally, as you know, I'm not from, an engineer or a data science background. When I tried to research, or when I did research and learn about MLOps and MLOps pipelines, I remember seeing in general it's more of a pipeline centric. Is that right? Pipeline centric rather than model centric. I think I've got that the right way round. So is that not the same as data centric then? Is that a whole other, is that a third thing?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it's like you have like this data centric, and then you focus kind of like in this version control and this kind of like evolution of data. You have the pipeline, and then you focus. Sorry.
That's okay. We can, don't worry, I'll edit it out.
That's very interesting because like you have this data dimension in which like you focus like on data version control, how the data evolves and how to control it. You have this pipeline perspective to those like how the workflow is automated and how like the pipeline works, and then it's like this thing about model centric, about like how the model performs and will be monitored and evolves over time. So that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, many dimensions to be aware of.
Yeah, no, more things. I need to look into the data-centric approach now. I need to update. Well, that's what I was saying before, always evolving, right? There are always new factors coming into play and new branches coming out of the tree. So, yeah, that's very interesting. I think a really nice question to end on would just
Mhm.
be about, whether it's MLOps or data science or just even AI related in general, what do you feel, is the most exciting thing happening right now in AI. I know, and we can definitely talk about it. A lot of people, are talking about Chat GPT right now, which of course is fascinating. But, as well as that, is there anything else, that you found really exciting that's happening
Yeah.
right now?
So yeah, regarding this question, maybe where I want to bring is kind of like the meta problem behind ChatGPT, which is the alignment problem, which is like a super interesting research problem in machine learning, and how that like aims to solve the question of like how we align agents with human intentions. So this overall kind of like question goes back to a research branch called alignment. So I'm very interested in that. AI wise, kind of like meta core machine learning wise, I'm super
Mhm.
interested in alignment. There is like a very there is a very nice book called Alignment Problem. There is like a internet of forum called, well, forum website platform called Less Wrong, and yeah, I mean, it can be it's very interesting. I mean, like
And
solid.
what does that mean exactly, alignment in the context of Chat GPT or the problem of the
Hmm.
alignment?
Yeah, the alignment problem. Yeah, I mean, how do you yeah, I mean, how do you align the human intention? How do you make GPT answers more aligned with the human really wants?
Okay. So is
Okay.
it is it about making the answers more accurate or more effective for humans? Because I suppose it's not quite the same thing necessarily, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess like the answer is like aligned,
Mm.
aligned with the intentions. Therefore, um, um, how can I say this?
Is is it a problem? So is it a problem that people are actively working to solve now? Is it something that they're working on?
Yes, yes. There is a research branch. They are kind of like the people. Jodorowsky is like a
Mhm.
scientist working on this,
Mhm.
and people from OpenAI are working on this as well.
Ah.
But yeah, let me get back to you with synonyms, because like there's like a whole article about like what is alignment machine learning. So yeah, let me get back to you
Oh
on
yeah,
this.
of course. No, that's very interesting because I think so. Are they just yeah, I guess it's just the continuous working towards the continuous improvement of ChatGPT. Is that kind of it? Looking at where where there is space to improve. Is that
I,
sort of what it's about?
yeah, I guess like it's like kind of like the improvement of large language models in general.
In
So
general, yeah.
yes, from large language models, I guess you can do ChatGPT, which is a product,
Mm,
but you can do kind of like more with those large language models, right? Like
yes.
translate things, generate a content, generate content, translation. So yeah, I mean, it's more kind of like related to large language models in general.
Ah, interesting. Yes. I mentioned briefly in another episode recently that you mentioned that translation and machine translation would be an example of that too, right? I've worked as a translator in the past and I did use, I think DeepL is one that I use, which is a very good machine translation tool, but it's not perfect, right? So and in the podcast, we were discussing people's opinions. Some people saying that, well, the birth of all of these tools is going to get rid of translators and things. Whereas I was saying, well, actually, kind of, it's not getting rid of them, it's just slightly changing the role, because when I was translating, I still had to have an active part in the translation. I just use the, large language model, the tool to do the bulk, and then you have to go through and edit it afterwards, right? But it's still, I agree that it could be more aligned, there could be ways for it to be improved just the same as Chat GPT, I guess.
Mm.
So it works across the what's the word? Just yeah, across the whole field, really.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Awesome. So I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so, so much, Gema, for joining and sharing all of your wisdom, all of your experience, and all of your examples, especially from such an interesting perspective. Um,
And yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you to everyone watching as well, wherever you're watching from. I really hope you enjoyed the chat today with Gema. See you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let's end with a little bit about Logic. At Logic, we recruit specifically within the machine learning engineering and research fields in the UK, Canada, and the US. We pride ourselves on our innovative, community-led approach and having a deep knowledge and understanding of the roles that we recruit for. That's one of the reasons why I've started this podcast. If you're looking for your next professional challenge, or on the other hand, you might be an organization looking to expand your machine learning team, then please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message. Alternatively, you can send me an email to becky@logic.com. Let's set up a call for a chat, or we can meet in person for a coffee.